Om Dewa Shi, Om Dewa Shi, Om Dewa Shi, Om Dewa Shi. Tamge tuje shajere sanjang yinje mada deje panjang siji lumbo dawe jibega shaje jabe jabla ke san san jagal benjin bola renje pimane chong kalande chong tata lon simbe kanonze orjin boche la ke san sai shizan kalan chiram jin korje de bo non derzelin la po Jaratimba con la sanzepe, Kajurimbo la que sanza Rome, Chije Yenja Porane, Tusum Sanje Kunjung Onye, Ransin Chugong Zondonze, Zabala Meja la que sanza, Dazu Simje Dangeje, Lo Chusun Rover Sinje Labdos, Julamdun Rover Sinje Labdos. Lan Trava Seva Sinja Labdozo, Trava Yihi Sinja Sinja Labdozo.
So first of all, Dashidele to all my Dharma friends. Today is the first day of our 14th Amitabha 100 million Amitabha Mantra accumulation retreat. And it's an incredible merit of all of us to come together for this retreat. We're really very fortunate. And also it's because today, according to the Tibetan calendar, so it's we're in the 6th month, and the 4th day, and this is the day where the Buddha had attained complete enlightenment, and after he attained enlightenment, he turned the wheel of Dharma for the very first time, and so this is the Dharma, the wheel turning day. And also on top of that, it's His Holiness Recitation Rinpoche's birthday. So this is a very special time to start a retreat like that. If we make an effort in practicing the Dharma and practicing virtue on a special Buddha day, and then on a holy day, then the benefit of that becomes multiplied. And so that is why we are so fortunate. And so we are very fortunate, but also we have to recognize that we are very fortunate for joining such a special practice together. And that is because when you recognize it, then you will find joy in the practice, and you will delight in the practice. And that is the definition of diligence. It is to delight in virtue. And it's really important to find joy in what we are doing. And that's also the case for our mundane activities. If we enjoy what we are doing, then also things will usually turn out better. And so now in the case of practicing the great 100 million Amitabha mantra accumulation retreat, for that to come together, we have already accumulated a lot of merit in the past. And as a result of that, we now have this special opportunity. And because it is a special opportunity that we have, we should really practice with great joy, with great delight. And then for the intention, you should not just think about the happiness of this life, but think that I'm going to practice Amitabha for the sake of all sentient beings, in order to liberate them all from suffering and in order to establish them in the state or the place of Dewa Chen, the Pure Land. This is the purpose of my practice, and this is what I'm praying for. So it would be good to cultivate such a motivation of bodhicitta as you engage in practice. So today we will receive teachings on the 6 Bardos. And so the teachings on the 6 Bardos comes in many different forms. There's many different teachings on the 6 Bardos, on Bardos in general. And so within, where we encounter these teachings is within the Buddhist teachings, the Mahayana class of teachings, and within that the secret mantra Vajrayana class of teachings. And so the teachings that what the text of the 6 Bardos that we will discuss today and belongs to the Vajrayana teachings, and they were taught by Guru Rinpoche. And then later discovered by the Derton Karmalingpa. And so these are now the 6 root verses on the 6 Bardos. So first of all, we need to understand what this term Bardo actually means, or literally totally a Barmado. So it's actually, it means in between, so something intermediate. So it's an ordinary term, something that is like in the middle, in between. For example, you have the central, you have the upper direction, lower direction, behind, in front, and then there's the center, in the center of all of that. So that it's the middle, the center. So it's that kind of part. Or we can also understand it as at the between state, for example, between this life and next life. Or for example, when there are parents of 3 children, then there's a middle child. There's an older one, there's a younger one, and then there's a middle child. So that's the meaning of bar. So it means middle, in between. And so now in Buddhism, we receive these Bardo teachings. And so then here, normally the way people understand, ordinarily the way people understand this term Bardo, what they think of is, oh, it's that time after we have died, before we take birth again, before we take on the next life. But actually there are 6 different kinds of Bardos, or intermediate states. And so what are those 6? So there is the Bardo of life, of living. Then there is the Bardo of dreaming. And there is the Bardo of meditation. There is the Bardo of dying. Then there is the Bardo of Dharmata. And then there is the Bardo of coming. There's the 6 Bardos that we will go through, and we go through the root text, and you probably all have that version of the root text. It was sent to you online. So you should really have it, because that's something, those root verses, you really have to understand them. And they're going to explain the meaning of them. But if you have the text in front of you and you can follow it along, and then you hear about, we're talking about the Bardo of living, and then you see it in the text, then you kind of understand, oh, this is the Bardo of living, or this is not a Bardo of dreaming, and so on. And then so when you listen to teachings and you follow the text, then there's something where you feel like you want to know what's going to happen after I die, where will I go, what will come next, what is the Bardo of becoming, where will I go next, and so on. And so actually the meaning of all of it, of all the Bardos, the different stages of where we will go from here to here to here, it's all included in the 6 Bardos, up until attaining liberation, becoming enlightened. It also explains the transition to the state of enlightenment. So it's good to have that root text so you can follow it along, and then really gain a deeper understanding as you listen to the instructions. So for example, we can also see this Bardo, this term Bardo, as sort of like the middle lane when you drive on a road. But you're not on either side. You're not going toward the left or the right side. You're just driving in the center of your lane. And so normally we can't really stay in the center. We either kind of swear one way or the other way. But let's assume we're right in the center of the lane, then that would be like a Bardo, being right in the middle of it. And so that's you're being in the middle of something. We can say that this is the meaning of Bardo. And so the first Bardo is the Bardo of life or living. And the duration of the beginning or the duration of this Bardo is it begins when, so you have in your previous life, you have left behind your old body, and then you take birth in this body. So you enter the womb of your mother. The moment you enter the womb of your mother, this Bardo begins. You are in the Bardo of living. And then you're born, you're a child, and you grow older, you grow old, and then you go into the death process. And that's where the next Bardo then begins. But so from the time you're conceived until dying begins, the entire time life is the Bardo of living. So all of us, we are in the Bardo of living right now. And all beings who that are born in the 6 realms of samsara are all in the Bardo of living. So as precious human beings, we have taken birth through a womb of the 4 kinds of birth. And so we are in the middle of this birth, just like we are being in the middle of a road, of a lane, but we won't stay. We are born, but then we are just here for a while, but one day we are all going to die. We cannot always stay here. So this Tibetan term for living, part of living, or living is like gene. So ge means born and ne means to stay. So we are born and we stay for as long as we are alive, basically. We stay to be alive until we die. That's what we call the Bardo of living.
Okay. 다랑알 뒤에네 발도 짜식 나는 로스 제네 자세 발도 짜식 정말 US.
Now we're going to the root verse of the Bardo of living. Does everybody have it? So the Bardo of living is something that we surely need to understand because we're in the Bardo of living. So now when the Bardo of life is dawning upon me, so that means dawning upon me is that is what appears to me now. I mean, I'm in the Bardo of living. And I will abandon laziness, for which life has no time. Because now we have all found a precious human body. Enter undistracted, and the path of study, reflection, and the Bardo of living, being in this life, is sort of the basis, the kind of the main Bardo from which other Bardos will then come. So there's Bardos happening within this Bardo of living, but the main the basis of that is this Bardo of living. And so that is, we have to recognize what that really means. And so what it means is that, so we, first of all, we have this precious human body. And the moment we are born until we die, we stay in this life. So we're all young, now we are all not young anymore, all grown up. And so this entire time is the Bardo of living. And this is a very crucial time. It's a very crucial Bardo for us. And so that is because the reason why it is important is because of the 6 realms in samsara, we have taken birth as a precious human being. And therefore we have an opportunity to practice the Dharma. If we do not use this life to practice the Dharma, then this life will just become empty. So that is what happens when we become lazy. So therefore I will abandon laziness. In the Bodhicharya Vatara, it says that this precious human life is extremely difficult to find. If one does not use it for something meaningful, there is no guarantee that one will find such a life again. And so some people think it's so easy to be born as a human. There's so many humans. But actually, it's extremely difficult to be born as a precious human being. And that is why it is called so precious. And we have to use it in the most meaningful way. We have to use this body. Through this body has the power to liberate us from the suffering of samsara. And so if we have to use this body to liberate ourselves and to liberate others from suffering. If we do not apply ourselves and use it in a meaningful way, we will not find this opportunity again and again in the future. So now is the time to practice the Dharma and not spend our lives in laziness. And so for that, to see that, we have to reflect on impermanence. So first we think about the precious human body, and then we reflect on impermanence. The moment we are born, we are subject to death at any time. We can die at any time. So we are impermanent, you are impermanent, and others are impermanent too. And that's really important to understand. And we need to understand how precious this human life is, but then we also need to understand that it is impermanent. And so often people, they do want to practice the Dharma, they want to practice merit, but they don't really think too much about impermanence. So, you know, you may understand karma. You trust in karma, but then you know about karma because you have met the Dharma. But then we don't really pay too much attention to what we should do and what we shouldn't do, the virtue and non-virtuous actions. And it's because we are mostly distracted, because we are lazy and distracted. So we think that, oh, I'm going to practice a little later, a little slowly, at some point. Or I'm gonna learn or study something a bit later. So we think that, and then we become distracted by all kinds of worldly activities, or we develop attachment to worldly activities or worldly affairs. And so we have an interest in practicing the Dharma, and we have devotion in these rituals, and we believe in karma, but then we never actually turn that into real practice. And that's because we don't really see the impermanence of this life. If you really understand impermanence, in the beginning, it will inspire you to enter into the Dharma. It will make you practice the Dharma. And then in the middle, thinking about impermanence will encourage you to persevere in your Dharma practice. And then in the end, it is because of having thought about impermanence, understood impermanence, that you will master the practice and attain complete enlightenment. And so therefore, it's really important to reflect on impermanence. So we have to really develop a kind of a state of impermanence and understanding of impermanence in our mind. And of course, that still doesn't mean that we can't engage in our ordinary, like, worldly activities. We have to do our work. We have to follow the worldly ways. But the important point is not to be too attached, not to cling too much to all of these mundane activities. And if you do have some empty time, immediately you would then turn your mind toward the practice, toward virtue. That is, if impermanence has really arisen in your mind, and then you will always think that I have to practice the Dharma. It's not okay not to practice the Dharma. So because you think of impermanence, you have a high regard. You see the importance of Dharma practice, and then just naturally you will engage less in those mundane activities. So when you understand impermanence, you will do less of the mundane things. And even if you just have a minute or so, however much time you have, you practice the Dharma, the more the better. But you will, in essence, not waste any time. And so in the Dharma, we often say, we often speak about a Dharma practitioner wasting or not wasting their life. And so, for example, it is just like a thing, an object. You have a nice object, then you want to make good use of it. You don't want to waste it. If you wouldn't use this precious human body and just be distracted all the time, it would be just like you have a lot of money, or you have something that can expire or become spoiled, or it breaks, and then you ended up never using it. Then we think that's, oh, I wasted that. We think that was a waste. And so similarly, if we do not use our precious human life to practice the Dharma, then we often say, oh, they wasted their life. And so bring that to mind and think that I'm not going to waste my life. I'm going to practice the Dharma. If you don't practice the Dharma, and you just even if things go well in this life, for example, if your business goes really well or you're very successful, it is of no point, no benefit. If you understand the Dharma, you will know that one day I'm going to die. And if I die not having practiced the Dharma, I will go on empty-handed. And then that is what we call a wasted, precious human life. I must not allow this to happen. And if you understand its true value, then you will not allow it to happen. So when you understand the impermanence, when impermanence really has arisen in your mind, you will turn your mind toward the Dharma. So in other words, whether or not you turn your mind toward the Dharma depends on whether or not you have really given rise to that thought of impermanence. So therefore, think about it again and again. First, recognize the value of this life, this precious human life. And then direct your mind toward virtue and towards the Dharma. Really, all the Dharma, the essence of all the Dharma, the key points really, the biggest, the greatest key point in the Dharma is really the thought on impermanence. In the Madhyamaka, in the middle way teachings, it says that understand that what is born is subject to disintegration. So, for example, if you have an object, any material object, 100% is going to disintegrate. So it's going to fall apart one day. And the same is true for our body. We are born, and therefore we are certain to die one day. So what is born is certain to disintegrate, to perish. And because things perish, they are impermanent. Or because they're impermanent, things perish. So one thing leads to another. So birth leads to destruction, and then destruction points us toward impermanence. Because all things are compounded, they are subject to disintegration. They're impermanent. And then it says, and because things are impermanent, you should know how to engage yourself. And that refers to recognizing with mindfulness, applying yourself with mindfulness. If you apply yourself with mindfulness in this recollection, you will realize accomplish the holy Dharma, and you will perfect the path of practice. So it's really very important to think about impermanence.
penna ngaso tamba tapa ti ja chimbo
even if we don't have this really like deep understanding of impermanence, it's simple to understand. For example, we started the practice this morning at 9 in the morning, and now it's almost lunchtime. time goes so fast, minute by minute, time just goes and goes. And if you say that I just want to go back to 9 o'clock one more time, you can't go back. You can never go back to 9 o'clock again. And so whatever you have done, it's already done. So if you have done good, then that's already over. If you have done bad, then that's all done. It's over. And so now we are almost arriving at that lunchtime, and there's nothing that we cannot go back in time. And so similar it is with this body now. So we are born, we have a precious human body, we live this life, and one day this life will be over. And then we are going to die. And that is because this life is impermanent. For example, I myself am like 50 years old. If I think I'm going to go back to age 30 for a little bit, I can't go back. I cannot go back to age 30. If I have some merit, then I might live a little bit longer. And if not, then I'm going to die. But in any case, life is impermanent. And so, moment by moment, life just passes by. And so, therefore, we have to really bring that to our mind and reflect on that. And my life is coming to an end. I really need to practice the Dharma. And why? Because now I have a precious human body, and I only have this precious human body because I have a great deal of merit. And not only that, not only do I have a precious human body, I also trust in karma, and I have devotion to the three jewels. I'm actually extremely fortunate. So I have to use this life and practice the Dharma. So in the root text, it says, so then enter undistracted the path of study, reflection, and meditation. So study, reflection, and meditation. So think that I have to practice the Dharma now. So how do I practice the Dharma now? It begins with studying. So that is hearing. We hear the teachings. We learn about the Dharma. So you hear the teachings from a Lama, from a spiritual teacher. And you hear all kinds of teachings. For example, the teachings, we understand the workings of karma, and so then we this is what cause and effect is about. So there are past lives and future lives, and this is how karma works. So we are introduced to the Dharma, and that everything that we experience is the result of our own actions. And so that is what we learn through hearing or studying. And then next we reflect. So then we have to reflect on what we have learned. So then you really think about it, you contemplate it, and you think that, oh, it's really true. Karma is really true. And all things are really actually impermanent. And samsara really is suffering by nature, and so on. So this is how you reflect on the Dharma. And when as you reflect, naturally your mind will turn will transform towards the Dharma. For example, when impermanence is very clear in your mind, then you will naturally feel that I have to practice the Dharma. I have to make an effort to practice virtue with body, speech, and mind, and I have to give up non-virtue. So you will then go into meditation, into practice naturally, because you think about impermanence. And so, because you think that if I don't practice now in this life, then what is going to happen? Karma is unfailing, then I will follow my karma. So what does that mean? If I've committed any wrong with body, speech, and mind, that will lead to the experience of suffering in the future. If I've done anything good with body, speech, and mind, it will lead to the experience of happiness. And so anything you experience, also the fortune of having this precious human body, is a result of karma, the virtuous karma from a previous life. And so, for example, you experience physical well-being or any kind of happiness in this life. That is because of good merit. So good and bad things happen depending on the level of merit or non-virtue that we have created. That's really important to understand. And if you understand that, then you will do your best to abandon negative actions and practice the Dharma, practice virtue. And that is because you know that if you don't do it now, one day the result, the effect of your action will just strike you, because karma is unfailing and non-transferable. Whatever you have committed will ripen only on you. In a sutra called the sutra, there was an instruction to the king, and there was it by Nagarjuna? Anyways, in that sutra, it is said that a teaching to the king. So, king, one day you're going to have to die, and when your time has come, none of your wealth, your power, your servants, and your family and spouse and so on will be of any use at all. After you have died, all that will be left, you will be left with, is your karma, and that will follow you just like your own shadow, the shadow of your body. For example, it is like again, a bird or like an airplane goes into the sky. You don't see the shadow, so you're alive, you don't see the shadow. But then it comes back down when it lands, and as it comes back down, you begin to see the shadow of the airplane. And so just like that, when you die, that the karma will be right there with you, just like your own shadow. Therefore, it's very important to follow the principles of karma. And so then in the quote, it says that the results of karma, of one's actions, will be unmistaken. So, for example, if you do something good with a good intention, even if it is just a very small thing that you do with your body or speech, something altruistic, and even if it's very small, that result will ripen, it will not go away. And the same is true for negative actions. If you do something negative with body or speech, even if it's just a little bit, it's just a small little thing. For example, you say something rude to someone, or you just have a little negative thought about someone in your mind, just a little thing. The result will not go away. It will one day ripen. So that is what we call the results of karma will not go wasted. They will never become spoiled, never expire. So one day when the time is right, karma, when the conditions are right, it will ripen, and the result will be there. So that is why it's very important to really consider karma and to practice even just the smallest virtue, and to give up even just the smallest non-virtuous action. If you think in this way, your mind will transform, it will change. So by really looking at yourself in this way and thinking that I have to do this and I shouldn't do that, you become your own teacher. You also become your own refuge, your own protection. You have to transform and kind of fix your own mind, make it improve your own mind, make an effort in virtue. Practice what you should do and give up what you shouldn't do. And so, especially as Buddhist practitioner, this is what we call we fulfill a meaningful life. We have done something meaningful. And that's really very important. So now coming to the root verse, it says, making perception and mind the path. So perception and mind. So perception here is your perception of whatever you see, any appearance. So here, that this is you, that's a person, that's a tanka, that's a house. So it's your perception, you perceive something. And then there is the mind that's perceiving it. This is this and that. So there's the mind is sort of like the subject. You see things with your eyes, for example, and then your mind latches onto it, clings to it. We call that a dualistic grasping at subject and object. And that's a very important key point to understand. And so in Buddhism, we speak about the relative and the ultimate truth. And that's important to understand. So on the relative level, there are various appearances, things that appear, we perceive things. But ultimately, they do not inherently exist. We know about that, for example, when we receive Mahamudra teachings. In those teachings, in the Mahamudra teachings, it says, you should decide that appearances are mind, and then that mind itself is emptiness. So these words are really actually a key point. So appearances is whatever you see with your eyes, and you hear something with your ears. You perceive all kinds of objects with your six sense powers, and these are all appearances, the things that you so the perceptions that come to you. And actually, so what you need to resolve is appearances are mind. So these perceptions, because they're your perceptions, it's your own mind. So therefore, appearances or perceptions is your own mind. And there is no real outer form, sound, smell, touch that inherently exists. It all is what you perceive it to be. So it's an appearance of the mind or a perception. So you decide, you realize that appearances are mind. And also when you realize that, you understand as a result that, therefore, because everything comes from my own mind, if I do good things, I will be happy. If I do negative things, I will suffer in the lower realms. That's the natural appearance of virtue is happiness, and the appearance of non-virtue is the three lower realms, for example. So when we experience suffering, therefore, it's not anything that somebody is doing to us. It's our own perception due to our own karma. And then that itself, that perception, that mind itself that perceives is empty. So ultimately, we have to realize the emptiness. So if you really look into the real nature of all these appearances, all the things that you perceive, they do not actually inherently exist. So they are not existing from their own side. If you understand this, you understand the emptiness. And so then in our root text it says, and realize the three kayas. So you make perceptions and mind the path and realize the three kayas. So if we do not realize, if we do not understand emptiness, then we perceive a dualistic existence. And these dualistic thoughts lead to perceiving those appearances in a dualistic way. And that leads to confusion or delusion. And because of confusion, we wander in samsara. And so now this is where study, reflection, and meditation come in. That is why we learn from Lama, for example, we receive teachings on Mahamudra. And then sometimes he spends some time and we think about these teachings of what we have learned. And then we look at our mind, we meditate on these teachings. We are often given the instruction when we receive Mahamudra teachings, look at the nature of your mind, meditate. So when you understand that appearances are mind, then the mind will go into a state of practice. And so what it will understand is that there is no self. You will recognize this false grasping at a self. and understand that it only arises due to this false dualistic perception. But when that dualistic perception collapses, you become free from dualistic thought. And being free from dualistic thought, you attain enlightenment. Rangchung Dorje in his Mahamudra, Karmapa Rangchung Dorje in his Mahamudra teachings and a Mahamudra prayer said that things have never existed inherently. So all these seeming material things have never existed, have never had any substance. It is just that we think that they exist when they actually don't. And this false belief in an existence that is not actually there, that's the confusion. And therefore he said, and by the power, under the power of such ignorance, we are confused further by various objects and appearances. I've become confused by the perception of me and mine. This perception of me and mine led to clinging and attachment. Clinging and attachment leads to mental confusion. So the flaw in this confusion is the dualistic perception. That is the mistake. It's a dualistic perception. And so various appearances manifest. These are the appearing phenomena. And then there is a perceiving mind. So there is a perceiver and a perception. And we perceive that as something separate. And this is why we wander in samsara. And so when we receive teachings on Mahamudra or the nature of the mind, and we are told to look at the mind. And so we try to do that. We try to look at your mind. You've received many teachings on that from different lamas, and in particular His Eminence Garchen Rinpoche, who explains these terms in very simple, very easy to understand ways. And so he explains to us how to practice Mahamudra. But then you also have to actually engage your mind in it. If you don't actually do that, if you don't really meditate, and no matter how many teachings you may have received, the actual essence will not come to you. You will not see the actual essence. And to see it, you have to actually practice. You have to really meditate. So you have to contemplate, like, what is this self really, and how does it not exist? How come it doesn't exist? What is selflessness? So you ask yourself these questions, you really analyze it, and all the things that you've learned, you contemplate them. And so really try to look at it in this way and practice in this way. And so this is not just like Rangchung Dorje had said, then you will understand your own confusion, the confused grasping at this me and mine, or this I, and realizing that leads to liberation. So that is making perceptions and mind the path, and realize the three kayas. So then when you see the nature of the mind, you see that the three kayas are actually your own mind. They're within yourself, because the empty essence of your mind is the Dharmakaya, and the natural clarity, the clear awareness is the Sambhogakaya. And then there is the manifold appearance spreading everywhere, which is the Nirmanakaya. So in a single moment of consciousness, you have the three kayas present within your own mind. And that is something you understand, you realize when you realize emptiness, when you understand emptiness. And so it says here that I have to make practice it until it is actualized and realize the three kayas. So you have to make up your mind, be determined, and practice to make your precious human body meaningful. Because you can think that I'm not going to find this precious human body over and over again. I have it this one time. So it says here, now that for once I have attained a human body, now this one time I have a precious human body, I must not waste any time. This is not the time to remain in the ways of distraction. And so non-distraction or distraction, and so it has many different meanings to it. But so normally when we speak about distraction, we think about how we are distracted by life in general. So we say that I don't have time. I have so much work to do tomorrow. I can't meditate. I can't come to practice. I have work to do. I have to do this and that. I have no time. So then we say, oh, this person is distracted. So then when they do other things, then they spend their time talking and with other people and do this and that. So from a Dharma perspective, a Dharma practitioner's perspective, you have been distracted during that time. For example, you have things to do, you have your job, you have to talk to people, you have your business, and so on. But so then, from when all of that is in your mind, and that is where your mind goes to, from a Dhamma perspective, you're in a state of distraction. So that is more on a kind of general sense. And then specifically, for example, there's also the distraction, the kind of smaller distraction that comes when we actually are not distracted. So for example, you come here, you don't do your worldly things. You come here to the 100 million Amitabha retreat to practice. So from that perspective, you're not distracted because you're coming here to practice. But then you can still be distracted when you're here. So because your body might be here, but your mind might be somewhere else. So even though you're not outwardly distracted, you could still be inwardly distracted. So therefore, it's always good to do some introspection. And even though you're here, think that, so am I really visualizing? Am I really focusing on the visualization? Am I really visualizing myself as Chenrezig well? How is my mind? Is it still? Is it calm? Am I reciting the mantra well? Am I being distracted in my practice? So you're kind of you're you're mindful. You're using some introspection. Am I not distracted? Because otherwise, your body might be here, but your physical presence alone is not what brings the benefit. You have to also focus your mind. And so there's these different ways of understanding this term distraction. So you can be outside and be distracted, or you can be even here and just think about all kinds of worldly things too. So the point is to think that now I have a precious opportunity to be here, so I must not be distracted. I must totally focus my body, speech, and mind. So on a larger scale, that refers to this life. Ideally, you think that I'm going to spend my life practicing the Dharma, practicing virtue. Or at the very least, you would think that for now that I'm here doing this practice, I'm going to focus on Dharma practice. So it's very important to pay attention.
Jamne concho san lan ju bamba. Om ahum.